My name is Phillip Thompson. I'm a veteran of the 1st Battalion Royal Australian Regiment, and I'm now the federal member for the seat of Herbert, which takes in all of Townsville, and I'm the Assistant Shadow Minister for Defence. I was born in Armidale, New South Wales. Didn't spend much time there. We moved quite quickly and early in my life to the Sunshine Coast. I was raised by a single mum who raised myself, my brother and my sister, and I was an absolute rat bag of a kid. And I didn't attend much school. I caused a lot of trouble, and I needed a good kick in the backside quite regularly that I got from my mum. But she's an absolute superhuman. She's done a fantastic job raising myself, who's a troublemaker, but also my brother and my sister. I'm the oldest of the three by 5 years and 7 years, which made it quite challenging growing up because of the big age gap. I wasn't really close to my siblings until I was quite older, really. Growing up on the Sunshine Coast, it's a really lovely place to grow up, but we didn't grow up like all my other friends there. I grew up in housing. I grew up in a very low socioeconomic kind of part of the Sunshine Coast, which is weird because it was right on the beach, and I enjoyed surfing. I enjoyed going down to the beach and spending my time there, and I also loved sport, and sport was a big part of my life. But I realised that school wasn't. So I wish it was. Looking back on my childhood, I wish I'd focused more on school. But I had a big chip on my shoulder. I was raised without a father, which was a challenging time as a young man. But when I left school, I started concreting and then bricklaying. Two very tough jobs. And when you're a young man, still a young teenager, it can be quite challenging. I did search and have a want for something else, and that was the military. So when I got to 17, I skipped down to the recruiter and said, I want to join, I want to get involved, I want to join the infantry. And turned out I didn't have the schooling to back me up to be able to do that. I didn't have a pass in maths and English, which was the minimum standard to get in. So I had to put myself through night school, and putting myself through night school created some challenges as well. Riding my bike there, it was one, but also not having that kind of study ingrained into me on how to do it. And it took a bit of time, but after I did, I was lucky enough to be accepted into the Australian Defence Force, and travelled down to Kapooka to do my training, which I just gelled with it. It was something that I was longing, and it was a discipline that I needed as well. And the old times of going to Kapooka and then being rough on you and things like that wasn't really there when I was there in 2006. But the discipline and the strong discipline was good, and that authoritative figure kind of gripped me up and pulled me in a line. One of the biggest inspirations for me to get into the Defence Force was someone by the name of Daniel Cook. He used to be in the New Zealand infantry, and I met him at the gym. I think he's 14 years older than I am, but he was someone that kind of I gravitated to. He was disciplined, he was a hard worker, he was a person that you look to if something was wrong, because that he would stand up and fix it. And having his positive influence on me, remembering that I was a troublemaker, I was a rat bag of a kid, and having someone like that kind of give me that little clip behind the ear and tell me to pull my head in actually guided me into choosing the best career that I've ever had, which has been an infantry soldier. And he was the reason I wanted to join. He was the reason that I put my hand up, and I still speak to him very regularly, as much as we can, in very different lifestyles now. And I'm busy in Townsville and he's in Brisbane, but he's someone that shaped my future in the ADF. I've always been in and out of home when I was growing up, or living at home, trying to live out, trying to be somewhat independent. So traveling to Kapuka, what wasn't that difficult for me, and being kind of gripped up into a regimented lifestyle, I actually enjoyed. I enjoyed, the kind of, you get up, you do PT, you drill, you learn weapon handling, you do all that kind of good stuff. You learn how to iron your clothes properly, like things that you take kind of for granted, but then when you're there, you understand the reason behind it. Making your bed in the morning isn't about actually making your bed. It's about achieving something first thing in the morning. And I think that was something that kind of made me think about my life choices previously, but also have a plan into the future. And I went from Kapuka to Singleton, which is the infantry training school. And it was a great time. It's very different to Kapuka, still cold. Singleton is cold, and coming from the Sunshine Coast was, the weather's very different. But it honed in your skills, and you're with everyone who's like you. So at Kapuka, you could have other corps that were with you, and you did. But when you get to the infantry training school, it was everyone there is like you, and everyone there is competitive. Everyone in there wants to win, and everyone in there is an alpha, and which I found really good, because everything's a competition. Whether you're doing a push-up or doing push-ups, or you're on the heave beam, or you're doing sit-ups, or you're shooting, or whatever it was, or you're running a BFA, whatever, anything you did, everything was a competition. It was nearly like who could eat the quickest too. Everything you did was a competition, and which I like that. Coming from sport, playing a lot of sport growing up, everything's a competition, and I love to win, and not everyone does win. I'm not a supporter of everyone's a winner and everyone gets a participation ribbon, because that's not how life works. There is winners, and there's people that don't win and then need to work harder so they can. And whether you see it in business now or anything, not everyone is the CEO. One person is. So working hard in your life creates, I believe, success. It creates that drive to want to win, and that's what I got at Singleton. And then I was posted to the 1st Battalion here in Townsville, and which is a great infantry battalion. We've got some really good infantry units here and around the country, but I was very fortunate to go to 1RR. Once again, you walk into a bunch of competitive alpha mentality, strong people but when you come in, you become part of the family. You're not the oldest brother, but you're in the family. So there is still a pecking order, but I think that's good, because it kind of fosters that family mentality. And I got into 1RR, and in my short time of being there, we're getting ready to deploy to East Timor, which you've got someone who didn't do much school, or didn't do well at school, then getting into defence, getting kind of primed up into that culture of how this is now your life, and the regimented side of it, and whilst fostering the family mentality, to then getting to a unit who's getting ready to deploy was moving very quick for me. But the deployment was amazing. We got on the ground, and everything that I've learned through training or in the unit, we got to do there. And we helped people. We travelled around the countryside. We learnt a different language, from somewhere in the Sunshine Coast to being in training to Townsville, to now being in a foreign country learning a language. That's cool. And helping people, that's fantastic. And it was something that kind of shaped my mentality then moving into the future stages of my military career, where the team was so important. The brotherhood was so important, because without or with a weaker link, that's now as strong as your section or your platoon. You're only as strong as your weakest link. So when you're overseas, you want your weakest link to be strong. Everyone's equal, everyone's strong, everyone's good. So then how do you foster that? You bring everyone along on the journey. You're not a good runner, guess what? We're going for a run, we'll make you a good runner. You're not good at shooting, it's okay, we'll make you good at shooting. But we do things together and we challenge each other. And then so coming back to 1RR, my whole view was, okay, everyone needs to be good. not, we'll carry them through. No, there's no carrying you through. You're either on side, on team, and you're working hard to better yourself, like we all were, or you're not in the, you can't grow with us. And everyone there wanted to grow and be great. And from there, I went into recon platoon, which was full of everyone that wanted to be again better, which kind of really sets a mentality now for my life. I think having pride in yourself and in your service is very important. And through training, I had pride every day, waking up in the morning and putting the Australian flag on my shoulder. That sense of honour, duty, resonated through me and through my veins. And everywhere where I either trained, whether we helped out on natural disasters or on operations, I had a sense of pride, and I had a sense of, everything we did reflected on the army, on the nation. So that high standard that we all wanted to hold ourselves to ran through all of us. And I'm extremely humbled to be able to serve my nation in East Timor and in Afghanistan. But that pride I had the whole time. I remember I'm not very tall, so I remember doing parades, and I'd have either the section commander or the sergeant or the platoon commander come over and have to push me down on my hat because my head was so high, because I'm so proud to be involved. And now I look back and it's one of the greatest things that I've ever done. When I deployed to East Timor, I did in 2007. I wasn't in East Timor in 1999 in Inifet. I went over there and it was a peacekeeping mission. And so my role in East Timor was very different to previous years and to times when we've reacted soldiers, when there's been civil unrest, when there's been fighting on the border. When I deployed there, it wasn't that. When we got there, it was humanitarian. It was peacekeeping. It was helping the community develop and grow, whether it was through providing funding for rural groups of people that would come together and build a school, it's different from when you hear about what happened in East Timor, especially around Inifet in 1999, where there was fighting, where there was the civil war, where there was civil unrest, where there was fighting on the border. And so hearing that to when I got there, it was very different. There was still clashes in the street. There was still protests. There was still fighting, but not fighting with rifles and things like that. They used to sling slingshots. They'd ground down a screwdriver and they'd shoot that through a slingshot. And I was very fortunate to not have encountered people shooting them at me, but it happened when I was there. But our role was to help the community. It was to ensure that schools could be built, wells could be put in, soccer balls can be given to kids in rural communities. And that also changed how you view deployments, because when you go on operations, people think straight away. So if you talk to anyone in the street and you go, I'm going overseas, I'm going on a deployment, they think of fighting and wars. When we went there, it was peacekeeping and stability. And having that stability when we were there calmed the country, calmed the places where we were at, because they've seen fighting, they've seen unrest, they've seen lots of civil disobedience and burning cars and things like that. So when we were there, it was that calmness of stability. And I think that it kind of shaped the way East Timor is now. And into deployments that followed mine, it was that calming, stable force that we provided. But also what it did was ensure that we were now better prepared for the deployments that came. My deployment in East Timor finished at the end of 2007. And what that meant was we back to Australia, we reset, and we get on with training. Because this whole mentality of training is so good, but it's intense, but it sets you up for fighting, really. We must always remember that the role of the Defence Force and the Army is to fight and win wars. That's the role. And so when you get back from a deployment, there's obviously people that get promoted, you go to specialist courses, like I did reconnaissance course, went to recon platoon, and then there's, okay, what's future operations? And our future operation was going to Afghanistan in 2009. And so we were doing courses to prepare for that. So I did the PMV Bushmaster driving course, which would come in handy when we deployed, but it was also the way that the 1st Battalion was breaking up who was deploying and who wasn't. So we were doing that, we were getting ready to deploy throughout 2008. So that included lots of training, lots of outfield training, lots of urban fighting, because that's what you're going into. You're not going into the scrub in the bush, you're going into an urban warfare. So learning how to do urban well and learning how to fight in close proximity was something that we spent a lot of time doing. And I was very fortunate to be moved into Charlie Company, which was the operational mentor liaison team, and our job was to train the Afghan National Army. So we did a lot of role playing and a lot of working with the Combat Training Centre on ensuring that how do you communicate with people that don't speak the same language as you? How do you communicate with people that could be perceived as hostile? We're going into a place where there's not uniforms being worn, so you don't have on this side an enemy, on this side you, and you fight in the middle. It is very unique warfighting, very insurgent tactics. So we tried to adapt to that. I think we did a fairly good job with the training, and we had different kits, we had different gear to what the combat team had. So you've got the training team and the combat team. The combat team had equipment that, like the McBass body armor, that was substandard, should never been brought in, and it to me could have caused a lot of carnage. The shoulder was too thick, so you couldn't shoulder your rifle well. The armor itself stuck out. It wasn't good equipment. In the training team that I was in, we had Eagle Marine, which was what the Yanks used, what different special forces people used, and it was slimmer, smaller, tighter, so you could move quicker. Because the Afghan army, they don't wear body armor, and if they did, the plate may be replaced with something else. It wasn't, they never didn't have that sense of protection that we had, and so there was a separation of what the omelette had and what the combat team had, and that shouldn't have ever been like that. We deployed first. We deployed to Afghanistan first before the combat team did, and it was pretty unique. We flew into Kuwait. When we got to Kuwait, we did a little bit of training, but not too much. Did a kill house. So you advance on a building, and you go in there and you shoot targets, live round shooting targets, and people like cardboard cutouts of someone with a rifle and things like that. And I remember there was a former US Special Forces guy there, very old, been around a long time. And I knew that it was going to be interesting when we got there at 6 a.m. and he's already halfway through his cigar. But he's like what you'd see in a movie. But he was good. It was great. The team aspect was just honed in. Everyone knew their job. Everyone knew their role. Everyone was excited to be there. And it came in handy that the training we were doing there. We left Kuwait, went into Afghanistan. And that was a different ride as well. So when we flew into Kuwait, I'm pretty sure we flew like a commercial airline. When we flew into Afghanistan, it was kits on, helmets on, your bags on your lap and your rifles next to you and things like that. It was a different feel. It wasn't the feel of going to East Timor. It was the feel of going into war. And what you watched on TV is exactly what was going through your head. And I was 21. We had Australian soldiers be killed there. It was very real leading up to going into Afghanistan, and then once getting there, it was hot. It was, you think of sand everywhere. There is the sand in the mountains, but then there's thick, luscious green. That's where the fighting happens, in there. So the countryside was different to what you'd think it was. And then when you get there, and we were in Tarin Kowt, we did a little bit of training, and then we quickly got on helicopters and all split up and went to our patrol bases. And I went to Patrol Base Kutus. And at Patrol Base Kutus, there's been soldiers injured. There's been special forces be killed from rockets coming in. Like, it wasn't a benign, non-hostile area. It was hostile, and there was fighting. And we landed, and the guys that we saw, big beards, dirty, been there a long time, looked like they've been living tough, and kind of changed up the mood from, all right, it's game on now. This is real. And when we got all our stuff, and they were doing some nursery patrolling and talking with us, there wasn't a, oh yeah, we get ready, we have a little chat, and then we go. It was, is all your kit good to go? Is your rifle squared away? Is everything you need you have? Do you have your med kit? Do you have your tourniquet? Because this isn't reserve grade. You're playing A grade footy here, and the difference between having something and not having something is your mate dying. So your mentality went from nice, benign kind of thinking to, no, I need to go back to what I'm used to, and that's been the alpha. We've got to go fight now. This isn't training. This is, you're at action. Your rifle's locked and loaded, and you're outside, either getting into the fight with a bad guy, avoiding getting blown up, or you're talking to locals to find out where the bad people are. So they were very different deployments, these two were Afghanistan. My first patrol, there's this feature called the Sphinx feature, and they sometimes shoot rockets at us from the top. We walked around and up the back, and as we walked up the back, they thought there was an IED there. We had no engineers. So the way that we either knew there was an IED, you either saw the wires and you called in engineers to fly in and come blow it, or you go over and have a look at closer. And I got close to it. I got given a Garrett wand, so you know what you get at the airport, and they gave me that, and they walked halfway down the hill and they said, go see if it's an IED. Now as a 21-year-old, I was like, I'll do this. It was terrifying. Now, a little bit older, I'll probably say, no, let's not do that. Let's get a professional in instead of me trying to find it with my feet. So I quickly went over and no, it's not an IED, and we left. But we didn't have the ability to check if it was an IED or not. So they gave the youngest a Garrett wand and pushed me in the right direction. I won't be doing that again, but it was a unique experience on day 1 or 2 of being at the patrol base. I went back and changed the underwear a little bit, and then got ready to get back involved in some more patrolling. We went further into our area of operations at our patrol base than the group did before us. We pushed further into like the belly of the beast to disrupt, and to get into a fight, to push the Taliban away, but also to let the elders and the community know that we're here now. The group before us suffered casualties, suffered people getting injured by IEDs, so they didn't push as further forward into it. Where our view was, well, we're here to do a job. We'll push hard. We'll push in, and we also didn't have. And it sounds weird, but we didn't have the sense of seeing what an IED did yet. We didn't know what death looked like or smelt like, or we didn't understand it. That changed. And one of our first moves, a car hit an IED, and the Australian driver broke his femur, and I think his bone either punched through or was pushing through it. Smashed his head and got stitches in his forehead. This was our first sense of, IEDs aren't good. They can cause a bit of damage. They can blow a tyre, 200 kilo tyre off a PMV. So that was kind of eye-opening because you watch it on TV or you watch it in a video and it's like, it doesn't affect me, so I don't feel it or taste it or hear it or fully understand it. And then when you see it, you're like, it's been a couple of minutes and I still can't see any further forward because the dust plume's so big, because it's now getting a little bit real. But it became very real in July when Ben Renato was killed and Paul Warren lost his leg. And that became real because Ben's my mate. I know him. When he died, it was a very sombering moment of life can be lost. And before I deployed at the airport, Benny was there and he said to me, "You're working with the ANA. The ANA have killed Australian soldiers before." And he said, "You're going into a very dangerous place, be safe." He died. Not me, not the crew in the omelette. He died from an IED. Paul Warren, who lost his leg, there was an old landmine underneath him with a lot of HME and a lot of explosives, and the way that he kind of moved, the IED detonated, blew his leg straight off and killed Ben instantly. And from that incident, the one thing that I think was done very poorly was the passage of communication. So I remember being in the gym and seeing two Black Hawks near touching the trees, flying just low, hard and fast. And then hearing over the radio that we had a prior 1, which is a life-threatening injury, and a prior 4, which is someone being killed. From that to knowing that it was Ben who died and Paul lost his leg was hours. The passage of communication was very poor. I get that everyone wants to keep the communication quiet, but these are people that we call brothers. These are people that we've lived with, that we do things with, that we know their families, they know our families, and to have that pretty poor communication, kind of stuck with us a fair bit. And I get that this is the first time in a long time that we had 1st Battalion have someone killed in action, but to me it was handled poorly. And when we did find out, the boss's idea of how to take our minds off it was to send us all out on patrol, which is not a really good idea. So Ben was killed and Paul lost his leg. They were doing a job out on patrol further south of where I was, and they were doing a cordon search, and they were set up in positions while it was all happening, and that's how he was killed. And then when they sent us out on patrol, so when you hear the people that have been injured or people that have died, it didn't touch me at the start. Like I felt numb, but I didn't feel anything. And then we went out on patrol. We cut it early. We're very professional. Everyone was doing the right thing. But, when your head's not fully in the game, that's when people get injured or wounded or killed. So we pulled back early. When we got back up, I got a phone call from the main base at Turrencout, and they asked me to return to go to the ramp ceremony, which I accepted. And Ben's a good mate of mine. So we returned, myself and Sean O'Loughlin from Patrol Base Cutis returned to Turrencout, where we would practice the ramp ceremony and do that. That's when it hit me. Going past a Connex where his body was in, with his photo out the front, then it became real, very real. So we were putting together the ramp ceremony of carrying the coffin. I'm too short to marry up with the other guys, so my job was to read the eulogy. I couldn't read it. I wrote it, but I couldn't read it. Every time I tried, I'd just cry, and I couldn't even speak. And I tried talking to my mum about it. I couldn't even talk on the phone. And by the time we got to it, when I read the eulogy, it was fine. I read it. I swore in it, got in trouble for swearing, but to be honest, I couldn't care less at this stage what they wanted to be viewed a certain way. It was a send off of our mate. They carried him onto the aircraft and flew him back to Australia, and then we had a wake that afternoon or that night, and I think the next day or the day after got back out to the patrol base, and then it was job back on. Now had to put the death of our mate on the shelf and go back out and get into the fight and win the war. And that's exactly how we had to feel and had to think about it. And it took after getting home a long time before we sat down and really spoke about it. But if we fast forward a couple of months, I was on a patrol. There was an incident a couple of days before. We were on a patrol, and we were returning back to the patrol base, and I was jumping across an aqueduct. An aqueduct is their irrigation system, and sometimes they're deep, sometimes they're not, sometimes they're wide, sometimes they're not. This one was, and as we were going across, I was the last person in the patrol, and because I'm not very tall, I couldn't just step over it, so I rocked forward, rocked back, and as I rocked back, an IED went off. Everyone kind of knows that if there's one IED there's most likely going to be a secondary one to get first responders. My medic ran back through the blast and jumped through where the IED went off and pulled me to the side and checked me over to see how I was. Put his own life at risk, put himself in danger. Tom Howe's his name. To jump back through where there's most likely going to be a secondary IED and put himself in harm's way to help me, is a hero. Luckily, there wasn't a secondary one there. They stripped my body armor off, checked me over. I had peppers all through my glasses, and I couldn't hear properly. And then I couldn't stand properly because I was concussed. My equilibrium was off because of my ear. Then I slowly tried to move back, and they were trying to move me back. I got evacuated back to Tarankout, and it was a weird feeling because getting evacuated out. And then when I got to Tarankout, they took me into the medical facility, and it just so happened a Dutch ear, nose and throat specialist was the head doctor there, and it was as good because I couldn't hear in my ear, couldn't hear a thing. Checked me out and said, "You got to go," which I'm still can't hear in my ear. But yeah, they sent me on my way and spent a couple of days there, and then spent some time in Dubai because Kuwait closed down now, so we went into Dubai as our place, and flew back to Australia where my rehab kind of started. From when Ben was killed and Paul lost his leg, my mentality went straight back to where it was at the start, and which is your job is to help the community, stabilise the area, and if need be, go and fight and kill the enemy. That's exactly where I went back to. And it was some weeks after when Ben was killed that we were on a patrol back, and I saw someone counting our patrol members. So once again, my height can either be good or bad, but when everyone went left, I went right, so through a crop. So they zigged, I zagged, got a little bit lost, got a bit disorientated. And then when I punched out to an aqueduct, I could see our guys travelling down a bit further than me and going into a field. As I went through onto this aqueduct, I could see someone looking at the like my mates, my team, and counting them. I thought he was counting. So I jumped behind my rifle, and I just kept an eye on like him. I then told through the SPR, told everyone just to stop moving, because I just had this weird feeling in my belly. Had this weird feeling that someone was standing on the top of like a building veranda kind of area, counting out people. And as everyone stopped, he pulled up a rifle to about where his hip was, and then I shot him and killed him. And from there, they moved back to me, and then we went from there into the building. So when you talk about from landing in a country where there's a war and you're fighting, to losing friends through an IED and having a mate lose his leg, to then weeks later fighting the enemy and ensuring that they didn't kill any more of my mates, to then fast forward another month to being blown up, it's a very vicious circle and some very tough life lessons that I learned in that deployment. Would I change my time there? No. Would I go back today? Of course. And I think we achieved a lot. I think we helped a lot of people, and I think we took the fight to the enemy in a country that wasn't ours. We fought there, so we didn't have to fight here. We stopped terrorist attacks. My view, my honest opinion, is we stopped terrorism and terrorist attacks from happening in our backyard by taking up the fight. And we answered the call. We went there, and many, many soldiers have paid their ultimate sacrifice there, and many of our brothers fought hard and stopped kinetic activity and fighting happening in Australia. And I think it's something that we should always remember. So I come home. I travel back to Australia under medical watch. And this is where my rap bag kind of comes back out again. And traveling home, land in, I think we got to Sydney. We landed in Australia, and there was a couple of hours before we could travel back, and we went to the Qantas Club, and the medic I was with is like, strict rules. You can't drink. You're not cleared to drink. You can't, you're going into hospital when you get back to Townsville. And I was like, okay, yep, sounds good. And I said, you should probably leave. And he's like, what do you mean? I go, because I'm drinking, you can't stop me. And he's like, no drinking. I said, okay, well, I'm going for a walk. I got to go out and buy some stuff. He's like, yeah. I just did a lap around to the bar and started having a few beers. And it was, I didn't want to get him in trouble. He didn't get in trouble either. But that kind of started the bit of the rat bagness again. And 21, my brain's not working very well. I've got kind of like brain fog. I can't hear. I feel like a coward because I've left my mates behind. There's people being injured every day by IEDs. I didn't want to leave, and you feel terrible that you're going home and they're not, and they're still in a war. And I wanted to do everything to stay, and didn't kind of work out. So I get back to Townsville, I get put in hospital, and my best friend, who's now my wife, Jenna, had to pretty much sign me out. Had to sign me out of hospital. I needed to go into care and someone that can watch me. She signed me out. We're both 21, and she's like, "Oh, what do you want to do?" And went out to town. We didn't cause some trouble. We started doing that, which I shouldn't have. I should have done my rehab and showed up to appointments and all these things that you're supposed to do when you're injured, but I didn't. And I was causing a bit of trouble. I was fighting. I was drinking a lot. I started going unconscious as well, which isn't really normal and not a good thing. And to the point where Jenna would roll me on my side, clear my airway, and wait for an ambulance, and I'd wake up in hospital. This happened quite regularly, to the point where then at one stage, one of the doctors went, I know what to do, let's give him a scan. Didn't have a scan on my brain before. And I had a bleed on my brain. And this led to me being diagnosed with a traumatic brain injury from the blast. So blast, no scan to there. And so I've got memory loss. I've got, which I thought was just brain fog. So I've got memory loss now, like proper lifelong, still holes throughout my memory. I can't hear in my ear, which I still can't. And I feel bad that I've left all my mates behind. Now, this is where trouble happens. So I started drinking far too much. I was angry with everyone, but really just me. I was, going in a spiral. I don't feel like I didn't feel bad about what I did. I don't have any feelings towards killing someone who's a Taliban member. I don't feel, absolutely couldn't care less. They were a bad person. They were willing to do a bad thing. They tried to hurt my friends. That person died. And I don't have a feeling of that. And then watching him be dragged by his foot by other members of the household. So dragging this person, not cleaning them, not doing anything ceremonial, dragging them to like a little shallow grave, kicking them in, putting rocks on it, and then walking away. Like this is how they were treating these fighters, and because they're not from there, they're not locals, they're not family of anyone there. They were bad people coming in to do bad things. I felt bad that I was leaving my mates. I felt horrible I wasn't there to help Ben when the IED went off, when he died. Bad that I wasn't there to help Paul. Not bad about what I did all my service. And then this all kind of was like a blender in my head, and it just went over and over and around and around. They offered help, but I didn't want help. I don't need help. I did, and turns out a lot of us did. A lot of the guys that came back, and they started to come back by this stage, and they needed help. And I've already been on this bender for a few months. So when they get back, I just continue this bender with them, and we all did everything together. We didn't separate. The families got tighter, and we caused trouble, and we made some mistakes, and it took a long time for us it took years actually for me to kind of be brought back into that sense. And I think it was 2012, I got a good kick in the backside from friend turned girlfriend, and then turned wife. And it was that kind of really hit home moment when she took me to the mirror and said, who are you and what do you want to be? And it kind of made me think a bit more about my life choices. And I lost years of my life because of drinking too much and causing too much trouble, and having my mates do exactly the same. They all went through something similar, but we all helped each other into the hole. So then we started helping people out of the hole. And some people didn't get out of the hole, and some people died by suicide in the hole. And I take all of it as a very personal blight on the failure that we did, or that I had, on not seeing the signs of them not doing too well. And we're talking as recent as a year or so ago. So, but in that time, Jenna and I got married. We decided to start a family. Townsville became home, permanent home, not just a posting home. And then we started changing how we and how I kind of saw the world. And it's a weird saying, but when you're in such a hole of despair, you can't taste or see color properly. Not in the literal sense, but you don't appreciate the things around you. You don't appreciate the food you eat, the color you see, the happiness of the world. and it's like you're inside an upside down witch's hut, and then when you start to get your head back on the other side, you see life and colour and happiness again. And yeah, it took a few years for me to get to there, and I got to there. There's always, and when I look back on it, there's always been a sense of service and service to the community, and that creates my purpose and creates my happiness. And so when I started to get back on my new normal, because I don't think you ever go back to where you once were. You create this new normal, this new happiness, this new purpose, new life that you enjoy, and new direction. And it's kind of like resilience is like a rubber band. You have it, and you get it through trying times, and then you hit a roadblock and you go down as the rubber band. And the idea is to try and bounce back higher. So then you're stronger, you have more resolve, you have more kind of drive in your purpose. And I got back into suicide prevention and wellbeing, and mostly targeted towards veterans, but that's what I jumped into. I would sit on any board, any committee, anything that would help someone, I would try and jump in and do. And I'd sit on individual welfare boards in defence, so in the infantry units mostly, which hadn't been done before. But then I created a good transition of thought for medical officers and senior officers, because when they put me on 3 months leave, it was the worst 3 months of my life, and that's what they should never have done, because there's no accountability, nothing to love, nothing to do. Like, what stops me getting up at 8 a.m. and drinking or doing something I shouldn't? Nothing, because I don't have any accountability. I don't have to put on clothes for the day. I don't have to get out of the house. So having accountability, that people don't want to do it because they're in a tough place in a bad way, but making people accountable actually helps them. And I think that's what I was trying to bring back in. And then during this time, we're also talking about having a family. And so working in that space. And then I was lucky enough, I was awarded the Queensland Young Australian of the Year. Like, we're going from social housing to now getting awards and things. It was really a weird feeling, and then in defence you're always humble. You don't brag about stuff. You get on with your job, and then to now have to talk about all the good things that you do was very hard for me, very hard. But then I was thinking, well, now I need to use this as a platform to help people, and this award to do good, and this door opens doors to do that. And then I start getting the taps on the shoulder about politics and getting involved, and once again, it's about service and helping the community. And my wife's pregnant, so I've got a little one on the way. I've got a political party that I was a member of tapping me on the shoulder going, hey, have you ever thought about this? And when they told me, they said, oh, you want to run for the seat of Herbert? That wasn't the start. The start was, have you ever thought about politics? And I was like, yeah, I could run for the mayor one day. And they're like, oh, what's your love and your passion? Well, Veterans Affairs, Defence, First Nations people. I'm a big fan on just helping people in general, strong borders, all these things. They just laughed at me. They're like, the mayor doesn't do any of those things. Have you thought about the House of Representatives? And I was like, sure, yeah, that's with Prime Minister and Deputy Prime Minister and ministers sit. They're like, yeah. They're like, yeah, I know this stuff. I didn't even know there was a Senate, to be honest, at the time. And so I knew that there was an upper house, lower house, but I didn't really know what the Senate does. And to be honest, sometimes I still don't know what they do. They won't like that comment. But so I started getting more involved in politics. And my wife's pregnant, and with our first child, Aston, baby girl. And so it was a very whirlwind of a time where I'm now trying to talk to members of my political party to talk to them about why I think I'd be a good politician. So now I've got to sell myself again. Soldiers veterans, sailors or aviators don't sell themselves very well. Where the humble people behind the scenes that get on with the job. So when you have someone leave the Defence Force and you go, what can you do? And they're like, not much. Well, all of them have leadership and management. All of them have project management. All of them can lead teams. The private soldier, which I was, could still lead a team. So, but we don't sell that. It becomes a problem. So when people transition out, sometimes they find it hard to go into employment that would reflect their ability and skill, and a lot of the time they're underemployed because they can't or haven't been trained to sell what they do, because everyone's the quiet, the grey man, the ones that just get on with it. And now, so I've gone through all that to now try and convince a political party, a very passionate political party in Townsville, that I would be their best representative. That was tough. And I'm young, so I was 30. I think I was 30. So that's a tough sell. Lucky that they put their faith in me, and I was pre-selected to run against the Labor Party, or the Labor current at the time member for Herbert. So my daughter's born now, got a baby. I'm campaigning, door knocking in an electorate, trying to help all my veteran mates, and sit there and try and take a breath and go, this is real as it kind of gets now. Your life is not your own, it's everyone's. So your everything you've done is public. They're good and they're not so good. And your family life is public too. And so it took a bit of an adjustment, a newborn baby girl, and being stopped in the street and someone wanting to ask me a question on what I believed in. And this was a year from before I actually was in a campaign. So we're campaigning a year out and having people go, what's your view on whatever that may be? Holding a baby, and with my wife, it was we're all very private people to now not so private. And then as we fast forward, I went into an election. It was different, prime ministers calling you and coming to your house and coming to Townsville, having people like Peter Dunn, who was the Minister for Home Affairs at the time before he was the Minister for Defence, holding your daughter while she sits on his knee and eats his food off his plate. Like, this is wild. This is not what a private soldier from one area should be doing. I don't belong here. Like, it was very, very imposter syndrome kind of feeling. And then when I won, the amount of pride that I had in defence and the amount of pride I had with the job I did, I have the same feeling. And I don't want to let people down. I don't want to let anyone down. And I'm determined that, people put their faith in me. Whether they voted for me or not, the majority of people put their faith in me, and I don't take it for granted. So that was my mentality from the start, getting into politics, wanting to create a future for my children, the children of Townsville, so they had opportunity to grow here, start a family here, and have a future here, is why I got into it. But then when it sits with you, it's a feeling, a very humbling feeling. There is a lot of pressure in it, but pressure that you can turn into energy to do. And I remember thinking on my first day in Parliament House, and I gave the address and reply to the Governor General. So I gave the first speech, and I was sitting there looking around, Prime Minister's 2 seats in front of me, Deputy Prime Minister's there, Leader of the Opposition's on the other side. All these people, 151 people, all successful in their own right. And there's the youngest member of Parliament, which was me, sitting there like trying to sink into my chair, not wanting to, not seeing myself there, like not seeing people that I thought I'd resonate with, going, my job now is to be Townsville's voice in Canberra. Doesn't matter if they're members of the Liberal Party or the Labor Party or the Greens or an independent, my job's to represent them all. And when I gave my first speech, I was so nervous. And I don't get nervous. Don't get nervous. Don't normally feel like that. But I listen to it now, and you can hear the shake in my voice. And it wasn't nervous because I was worried that I was going to make a mistake. I make mistakes. I don't care if I make a mistake. If you see me make a mistake, that's cool. That's normal. I was worried that, I've got such a big electorate, Townsville, that the people, I just don't want to let them down. So whether it's day 1 or day 300, I don't want to let you down. And that's the mentality I took there. That's why I've gone against, when we were in government, I went against the government. I went against ministers, went against prime ministers, took the fight to the opposition. And I think that's what representation should be like. And we listen. My job is to listen, work for, and deliver for the people of Townsville, and that's what I try to do every day. Oh, and then I had another daughter too. Oh, forgot her. Yeah, Emery. She's now 2, and Aston's 4, and they are just like their dad, all trouble. But my eldest, Aston, she walks down the street and says hi to people. Like, she's an extrovert. She's not an introvert. She's like, hi. And yesterday she said, hi, this is my daddy. Like, she's introducing me to people. Like, she's a future campaigner, I think. And Emery, she just runs around, free spirit. She's trouble though. Like, I can see a lot of me in her. So yeah, she's going to be good. And my wife, she's a superstar. She's a single mum, essentially. I'm away all the time, and she raises both our daughters. We don't have family here. Her family live in Cairns. Mine live down south, so she does it all by herself. And when I'm here, I try to invest all my time there to be there at night, be present all the time, putting phones away and being there with the kids. But she does it a lot by herself. And there's that old saying behind every strong man is an even stronger woman. Well, I think the saying needs to change, because my wife doesn't stand behind me, she stands beside me. And we do everything together. All the successes that we have and share as a family. And with that comes any hiccups along the way, we share as a family too. But my wife, Jenna, she's a superstar, and she reminds me of kind of like how I grew up, where mum did everything, but I'm adamant to when I'm in Townsville at night and when I'm in the afternoon, the phone's away and those kids get everything, all my attention, because I want them to grow up like I do for all the other children here, to have that opportunity to have that strong present family values, so they grow up to be even better people than myself and Jenna.